Hello and welcome to Kelly's Wordy Reactions. So, apparently, Donald Trump is looking into how he might be able to send U.S. citizen prisoners to the torture prison in El Salvador. Not only has he hosted the El Salvador president at the White House, who has laughed and mocked at the idea that he would have to send back um, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, um, and basically said that he would not send him back. And Donald Trump said, "Well, I can't, I can't, I can't get him back because the president of El Salvador won't send him back." So it's basically a mocking of the Supreme Court decision that he would have to facilitate bringing Mr. Garcia back here to the United States so that he can go through his due process. Um, none of the deportees that he has sent over to El Salvador have received their appropriate due process. And now, in this clip that I'm going to show you from MSNBC, that was on the actually the Rachel Maddow show, put this up. But or I'm going to let you hear it. I think I'm going to keep the overlay on top just to change it up a bit for YouTube to make it appropriate for YouTube. But yeah, so I'm going to play this Rachel Maddow clip for you where you're going to hear him discussing or Donald Trump discussing sending our homegrown prisoners to this prison. And then right after that, Rachel Maddow has a legal expert who has been listening to this rhetoric and who is preparing for what may be to come from this administration with regard to sending, or with regard to attempting to send, hopefully only attempting to send U.S. prisoners to this torture prison in El Salvador.
Okay, the tape is a little hard to hear, but if you listen closely, you can just make out what the president is saying as he enters the Oval Office today with the president of El Salvador.
Criminals next. Yeah. I said homegrowns are next. The homegrowns built. You got to build about 5 more places. Yeah, that's fair. All right.
Laughter all around. That was Donald Trump today talking to the president of El Salvador, a man who calls himself the world's coolest dictator. And you could hear there what sounded like Trump promising that he's about to send Okay, the tape is a little hard to hear, but if you listen closely, you can just make out what the president is saying as he enters the Oval Office today with the president of El Salvador.
Criminals next. Yeah. I said homegrowns are next. The homegrowns built. You got to build about 5 more places. Yeah, that's fair. All right.
Laughter all around. That was Donald Trump today talking to the president of El Salvador, a man who calls himself the world's coolest dictator. And you could hear there what sounded like Trump promising that he's about to send to a prison in El Salvador the, quote, homegrowns, meaning U.S. citizens. He says homegrowns are next. You're going to need to build about 5 new places. The Trump administration has flown hundreds of non-U.S. citizens to this foreign prison in El Salvador already, including 10 more that they flew there this weekend. Even though the U.S. government has sent these people to this prison, The Trump administration says they have no protection under U.S. law there, that this facility doesn't answer to U.S. courts. The people sent there are just gone. They're sent into that prison maybe forever with no way to be heard, no way to contest whatever the designation was that got the U.S. government to send them there. Certainly no way to get out, ever. Are homegrowns really next? Would the American president send American citizens to indefinite, totally lawless, apparently permanent imprisonment in El Salvador as well? Is he open to that? Apparently, yes, he is.
If it's a homegrown criminal, I have no problem. Now, we're studying the laws right now. Pam is studying. If we can do that, that's good. And
if we can do that, that's good. Pam, meaning Pam Bondi, the Attorney General. So he wants to send American citizens to foreign prisons where U.S. legal protections don't apply at all, where people can be held for the rest of their lives without ever having a day in court or any sort of process. He says Attorney General Pam Bondi is, quote, studying the laws right now to see if he really could do it because he'd love to do it. It was only last week on Thursday when the Supreme Court ruled unanimously 9-0 in favor of a man named Kilmar Abrego Garcia. He's a legal resident. He's a Maryland father. The Trump administration admits they sent him to that prison in El Salvador by mistake. The Supreme Court effectively ordered the Trump administration to facilitate this man's return to the U.S. from that El Salvadoran prison without explicitly defining what that would look like. The Trump administration has insisted that they can't return him, and they don't intend to. They said that the man's fate is up to the president of El Salvador for some reason. Today in the Oval Office, it was a reporter who finally asked El Salvador's president if he would please return this man to the United States. The El Salvadoran president called the question, quote, preposterous. Of course he wouldn't. So we have here a constitutional nightmare, a legal nightmare, obviously a moral nightmare. Cheryl Eiffel is the former president of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. She has been sounding the alarm about this. She has argued that Trump will start testing constitutional limits by trying to deport U.S. citizens from American prisons to places like El Salvador, and that Americans, in order to stop that slippery slope where it is, must take on the challenge of caring about and standing up for U.S. prisoners. Quote, many of us have been working on how to legally head off this nightmare, but public outcry and support will be essential. Are you ready to march for the most despised members of our society? Will you call your representatives about those who are imprisoned? If you can't feel for them or their families, remember that this is just a stage in a plan that will land ultimately at our own doorsteps. Every one of us deemed inconvenient by this administration will be under threat. And every time Trump is successful, he grows more emboldened and more convinced that nothing can stop him. Joining us now is Cheryl Eiffel. She's the Vernon E. Jordan Jr. Distinguished Chair in Civil Rights at Howard Law School. Ms. Eiffel, it's been too long. Thank you so much for being here tonight. It's an honor to have you with us.
Thank you, Rachel.
You wrote this piece over the weekend, sort of sounding the alarm. He's talking about U.S. citizens. He's talking about U.S. citizens. This is a constitutional end. This is an end of constitutional protections in the United States in a really fundamental way. That was before today's Oval Office meeting, where the president very cheerfully confirmed that, oh yes, he's talking about doing this to U.S. citizens too. Is the president actually moving faster than you thought he might? Are you at least pleased that the American public have to see this as clearly now as you have been?
Yes, and I very much thank you for this conversation tonight, Rachel. I've been sounding the alarm because Trump has been saying it over and over. In fact, he started out when his family first met with the president of El Salvador a couple of months ago. And he said then that the president of El Salvador was interested in housing U.S. prisoners. He said it again the other night as he was exiting or entering his plane. I don't remember which one it was, where he talked about this again. He said, you know, for our worst of the worst, people who knock old ladies over the head, people who push people in front of subway trains, or if you had a bad judge and a bad prosecutor who didn't do the case right because they only care about politics. He's been repeating this over and over again. He tweeted that he can't wait wait to see people who attack Teslas face incarceration in El Salvadoran prisons. And by now we know Trump a little bit. We know that when he keeps saying something over and over again, he is not joking. We know that he is incapable of holding his cards close to his chest when they are having discussions about these things. And we've seen two new reports. One was in Politico this weekend about plans. One is Stephen Miller's plan to do a mass denaturalization of naturalized U.S. citizens who are incarcerated. We saw, can you believe it, the name Eric Prince again, who apparently is involved in an effort to use private prisons in El Salvador and in other countries, with the U.S. perhaps entering into a treaty of cession, something I really think about when I think about maybe getting Alaska from Russia, a treaty of cession so that the U.S. would control the territory in that country, and therefore there could be no claim that U.S. citizens were being moved off of U.S. soil. It's crazy and diabolical, but it's real.
When Attorney General Pam Bondi does this studying, as the president said today, when she looks into the legality of this, which the president continually says he doesn't understand, doesn't really care about, wants to find out whether or not it's legal, it's being looked into. What is she going to find when she looks into U.S. case law and constitutional protections to find whether or not this is something that they could legally do?
Well, it's a strange thing. If she didn't find the Fifth Amendment that says every person in the United States, person, not citizen, is entitled to due process of law, cannot be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process, which should have stopped the deportation of Mr. Abregu Garcia and others who received no due process. I'm not sure what she's likely to find with this look. I think there are two things to think about here. One is that, as almost everyone knows, there are nearly 2 million people incarcerated in the United States. Most of them are in state prisons, not in federal prison. The person who assaulted the old lady is most likely not in federal prison. There are about 200,000 people in our federal prisons. So I'm not sure the population that Trump is looking at, if it is the state prison population, that creates complications for him. And in any case, we have a constitution that prevents cruel and unusual punishment, sending folks here who are incarcerated to what has been identified as a torture prison, as a prison that the warden of CCOT in El Salvador said is the prison no one ever leaves. That is simply a violation of the constitutional rights of prisoners. Prisoners who are citizens of this country are United States citizens, and they have the rights of citizens. And so I don't have any faith that Pam Bondi will, in her research, will feel bound by that. But that is the state of the law. And that's why so many of us have been looking at this very closely and preparing. Because I think, as you alluded to earlier, Rachel, when the plane takes off, the plane takes off. That's what happened to Mr. Abregu Garcia. This administration has made clear they're not interested in lifting a finger to get people back, even people who were wrongfully they were all wrongfully shipped to El Salvador, but certainly this individual was, by concession, wrongfully sent to El Salvador. So it's very, very alarming, very, very frightening, and something we have to get out ahead of.
Sherrilyn Ifill, Howard Law School professor and friend to this show for a very long time. Thank you for your time tonight. We're going to stay very closely on this story. We'd love to have you back soon as it
Thank you.
as it develops. Thanks.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thanks. All right. Much more news ahead here tonight. Stay with us.
All right. Some of these things, I don't know. It's like, I have no words. It's hard to believe that it's this bad, that things have turned in this direction so quickly. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and get off of here. I want to thank you for joining me. And yeah, I'll see you on the next one. All right. Bye-bye.